Hey everybody, it's John at wordballoon.com. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. We've got a lot of great programming that we've been doing in March, whether it's been the Star Trek Picard episode reviews, great conversations on Word Balloon, fun talks as well on the Oh Yeah podcast. I hope you've enjoyed them, and I hope it's helping you pass the time as we're all finding ways to distract ourselves while we deal with the current status quo. Don't worry, we're going to get through it, and Word Balloon is here to help you. Questions or comments about the show, reach me via email, john@wordballoon.com. You could follow me on Twitter, @JohnWordBalloon. Follow me on Facebook, not only under my name, but also the Word Balloon Network. Word Balloon Live is where I've been posting my videos on Facebook. There's also YouTube's channel, Word Balloon, where a lot of new video has popped up and will continue to as I do some other video interviews and live streaming. There might be one more commercial before we start the show. If there is, thanks for listening, and we'll talk in 60 seconds. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, happy to welcome back Joe Casey with a really interesting one-shot coming up in June. Well, at least it's scheduled for now in June. All America Comix. Her name is America Vasquez. Now, she may seem very similar to the Marvel character that Joe created, America Chavez, but he decided to revamp the character. He kind of announced he was going to do this a few years ago, and now we finally have the product. Him and Dustin Nguyen, the great team that gave us Wildcats 3.0, a very interesting new screen-ager character, a character of today in her early 20s, not really interested in the traditional superhero world. A lot of meta conversation going on in this very, very interesting book, and you can appreciate the subtext. But man, it just blew me away, and I confess I hadn't been reading Ms. America from Marvel, and I know that Kieran Gillen just had a recent run with her as well. I saw the covers, but never really read the book. I was blown away by this one shot. You hear my stunned expression when I'm talking to Joe. But we also talk about other great books of recent vintage from Joe Casey, like 1975. That's that Roman numeral book. Let me do the math for you. It spells 1975 with all the C's and the X's and the V's and the like, and even an L in there. That's really cool and a great grindhouse kind of action series. There's also his wonderful series Sex, which is a world-building sci-fi futuristic crime story that, again, Joe is really good at giving us very familiar ciphers. Then we also get into his animation work. And, I didn't talk much about Hero 6, but I did talk about Ben 10 and the fact that it continues to evolve new versions of Ben 10 in cartoons and toys, and how toys are part of the equation in terms of what the men of action are dealing with their creation, Ben 10. Really interesting stuff. Of course, we get Joe's perspective on where he sees himself and the comics market in general. Now, all this was recorded before the coronavirus really took hold, and so there's not much about that. But, what you do get is some really interesting perspective from a guy that's written a ton of great comics, going back to his runs on the X-Men and the Avengers and Batman and Superman. Great stuff over the years from Joe Casey, and he continues to shock us and be a very provocative writer in the best way. Joe Casey on today's Word Balloon, all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners and their wonderful support via Patreon. Thank you greatly, League, for your support. It's truly appreciated. Several new leaguers have joined up since COVID-19 has become a part of our lives. Greatly appreciated. As I promised last week, I have every intention of upping the amount of podcasts during this situation where we're all kind of stuck inside looking for things to occupy our time. I'm here to help pass the time with some great interviews, great discussions, maybe even a few trivia games here and there in the days and weeks ahead. So thank you greatly for your support via Patreon, League of Word Balloon listeners. If you want to subscribe, Word Balloon is free. But if you like what you hear and you want to help out the cause, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon, or you can click on the Patreon ad at wordballoon.com, and that will take you to my Patreon page. I am upping the game. I am getting very close to be able to do some live streaming. Expect that in the days and weeks ahead. But in the meantime, thank you greatly for the support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Also, thanks to Aftershock Comics for their support. Hey, they're facing a lot of publishing decisions as far as their schedule moving forward. But this is a great time to go to Aftershock's website and really look at some of their great books in the past. And, if your local comic shop still offers curbside service, I would ask that you consider picking up an Aftershock book, whether it's The Last Space Race or Killer Groove from Ollie Masters, or the great volumes of Animosity from Marguerite Bennett, and Baby Teeth with Donny Cates, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis, a lot of other great Garth Ennis books at Aftershock. You can get the first arc of Dark Red from Tim Seeley, or the first arc of Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn. There are other great Aftershock books that I'm sure you will find a genre that fits your reading needs. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. A conversation with Joe Casey, The Past, Present, and Future, and a really great image book that is coming shortly during the summertime from Joe. Really, really neat. And it's Dustin Nguyen, his old partner on Wildstorm 3.0, back together on this new project. But I think you're going to like hearing about it, because it really does speak to the generation gap that we're currently experiencing right now, even within the comics culture. Okay, Boomer. You know, he turns me on to a new phrase that I find fascinating. I had never heard it until Joe used it. Screen-agers? I'm new to that, and you'll hear my surprise when I talk to him. Really great talk with Joe Casey on today's Word Balloon. Joe Casey, welcome back to Word Balloon. It's ironic, Joe, because May 10th will be my 15th anniversary, and I haven't talked to you in 15 years.
Oh, my God.
It's really good to talk to you. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Older, but I'm fine.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 15 years, does it?
Well, like I was just telling you off the air, I'm like, Officer Down, I got to talk to Joe. I haven't talked to him in a while. And then, of course, that was like 6 or 7 years ago. And something like that, right?
Yeah, listen, we're still hanging in there, both of us. That's the important thing.
Absolutely. Here, I want to describe, because then again, and then I'll get on to the current stuff. Image Comics is this was from 2010, when you were re-releasing the Celestial Edition Volume 2. Or releasing, not re-releasing. And I'm like, I thought it'd be a good time to revisit this 2005 talk with Joe Casey. We talk about his collaboration with Tom Scioli and their love of Jack Kirby and the Cosmic Era brought to life in this incredible series. We also look back at Automatic Kafka with Ashley Wood. Yeah. Batman Faces with Cully Hamner.
Oh, God.
Your run on Superman. And the 2005 miniseries with Scott Collins, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Wow.
And then Dick Clark came out, and we rated a record, I think, on American Bandstand after that.
Oh, God.
That's how long ago it was, Joe. I'm sorry.
Wow. Wow.
So, but anyway.
Well, I've done some work since then.
Yeah, man. Well, no, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the current stuff and the recent past as well. Mm-hmm. So, and also I'm really interested, honestly, in we never really talked about your animation. So if we could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great too.
Sure. Whatever you want.
Excellent, man. Well, let's start with the new series. I appreciate the preview. And it's All America Comics or All American Comics?
All America Comics. I want to get in trouble there, yeah.
Oh, that's true. Shame on me. That's right. And then Comics with an X.
Yes. I do what I can to skate by, legally.
Well, and also in the story, your hero is certainly a groundbreaking original hero. I'm saying that. But also what I like is, and I've seen this in previous works as well, there are familiar tropes that, and you'll forgive me, but I'm kind of, I appreciate the originality of the story, but it's like, I could see this at one of the big two if they were willing to go this far. And of course, they're not willing to go this far. And I'm assuming that's why some of your ideas have been creator-owned ideas in the last few years.
There's a bit of a proof of concept vibe to this comic. I'll freely admit that. But I think it worked,
Yeah.
I'm happy to have done it, but there are some things that have a certain ring to them, let's say.
Yeah, there's just like scenes where your hero encounters other heroes, and it's like, okay, I kind of recognize a few ciphers here and there, and that's great because it's in contrast to the story that you're telling and the character you've created. So give us the 10-cent pitch of what this is about, how much you want to reveal right now before I get into my questions.
Well, it's mainly a story that deals with different generations of superheroes. And that was really the motivation to do it. We're seeing it, on the readership side, where you got to wonder, is the audience for the characters that we grew up on shrinking? And, is the audience that is coming into comics, younger generations, younger creators, younger talents, younger readers, what's relevant to them and what's not relevant to them? And I wanted to explore that in a way that, to be quite honest, in a way that folks of our generation would be able to recognize.
Yeah.
And it's a straight up superhero comic. I haven't done one of those, it feels like, in a little while. And, it's a 4-color orgy of epic proportions. It's got a little cosmic comics thrown in there for good measure.
Yeah.
Got a little meta commentary, which we all love.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think that the character itself is a worthwhile character. And while there might have been other characters in other places that are reminiscent of this character, I think this one definitely has her own thing going on. For reasons that are long and varied. This character turned out to be a lot more original than I thought she would be.
Do you? You're playing with allegories on a lot of levels, and in fact, there is a whole perception of what we see as reality on a very big cosmic scale going on in the story, but also this generation is, and I've never heard the phrase, and again, maybe this is showing my age and stuff, but I love screen-ager.
Oh, yeah.
That's fantastic. Is that in the zeitgeist and I just have missed it because I'm an old man? I mean, what's going on?
Well, yes. I don't know if it's in the zeitgeist so strongly. I don't know if anybody, I don't know if teenagers would refer to themselves that way, but I know that I've seen that word thrown around probably by old farts like us,
Okay, man. Yeah. Well, it's like, is that like our response to "Okay, Boomer," basically?
Right.
Go on.
Well, I think that I'm trying to look at. Listen, I have some firsthand experience with that younger generation, and I think that that collision of ideologies is interesting to me as a writer. I don't really have any axe to grind. I don't have any real. I don't feel like I'm being moved out of the way by anybody coming up, after me or anything like that. It's not about that. It's just, it's interesting as a writer to see ideologies clash and to juxtapose them in some way. And that's kind of the basic idea. And also on the cosmic side of it, I liked the idea of somebody of this new generation confronting those big cosmic questions or being confronted by them. I hadn't seen that. Usually in the material that is being made by creators of that generation, basically the new crop of creators coming in, they don't seem interested in that sort of Kirby level of comic book mythology. And that's, it's totally cool. Everybody has their own thing, but I liked the juxtaposition of some classic ideas with a new character.
Yeah. Well, and this new generation really facing it. I agree with you. And also isn't it interesting, man? Because like we were on the tail end of the old generation gap that they used to talk about, and we were the kids.
Yeah.
And now there is this new world. I'm teaching audio production at Columbia College in Chicago, and they asked me to do it out of the blue, and I'm like, okay. And they had this big orientation about, hey, this generation that you're going to be dealing with really is different and has different ideas. And it was eye-opening and truly this is not BS. I find it fascinating having conversations with them, the cultural differences. I had them produce a 60-second Seinfeld commercial because I wanted to, see how they could do it and how they'd write, edit things together, gave them a couple sound drops. And one kid goes, this Seinfeld show, was it like a sketch show? And I'm like, no, it was a sitcom. I never watched it. And I got 12 kids. I'm like, who's seen Seinfeld? 3 kids. Okay. Wow. I'm like, you're lucky I didn't give you I Love Lucy to code up right now.
Right.
Which is like, hieroglyphics, I'm sure, at this point. But yeah, it's interesting. It really is interesting. Their reactions to, we're on different channels. And yeah, it really is this kind of, I hope it's not a generation gap. I hope we're trying to learn from them and everything. And it's, are you a father? Is that your connection to them?
Oh, yeah.
All right, there you go, man. Okay.
And I don't want, and it's not about, I certainly realize, I'm well aware, because I've been there many times in my career, that even attempting material like this with a character like this is putting my head in the lion's mouth. But like I said, I've been there before. I've been at this a long time, John. I've been at this a long time.
Absolutely.
And I've seen things come and go, and I can't let that stop me from doing something that I have a creative urge to do. And I'm sure I'm going to get shit for this on many different levels. But that's okay. I can take those hits. And if ultimately I learn something from taking those hits, then it was worthwhile on that level alone,
Yeah.
So it's, it's all good. I try to have no regrets. I think I'd have more regret if I was timid about attempting something like this than I would be kind of plowing ahead and, letting the chips fall where they may,
Sure. Well, I got to say, man, and again, I this is the 50-year-old perspective, but it doesn't sound like Bob Haney back in the 60s and 70s trying to be hip and brave and bold and Teen Titans and stuff, Daddy-O. And, that kind of, poor guy was trying really hard to relate to kids and everything. And it's like, oh, God bless you, Bob. It's all right, man. So I, at least, again, and also, you really get inside this character's head, as you should. It's interesting to see the narrative take place in a Twitter or texting sort of, I don't want to get you in trouble with copyrights, but, that kind of social media kind of presentation for thoughts. And again, fitting for the character. But and it's interesting because I've read other articles and I haven't really seen you specifically on social media. Are you still kind of staying away?
Yeah, I've never been on it. I've never had Facebook or Twitter or any of that stuff. And it's funny because I always feel like back when it started to be a thing, I guess MySpace was the first thing where everybody's like, hey, you got to get on it.
Yep.
And I thought, this thing is going to come and go. I'm not going to waste my time. I got better things to do. And I was right about MySpace and kind of pretty much wrong about everything else. Everything else has kind of seemed to have stuck around, but I'm too far gone now. I can't backtrack, and I wouldn't know what to do on social media, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't know what to talk about, what to say. And I would be more concerned about getting in trouble, getting myself into trouble.
Well, I understand that. Sure.
So it's not worth it. Something like this, a book like this is dipping my toe in that water, but I'm doing it in sort of one step removed from being in it, and it just feels more like what I should be doing than trying to get out there and mix it up on the social media platform. It's just not me.
No, I hear you, man. Well, and I remember back when you would do your basement tapes on CBR and, kind of have, express your thoughts that way.
Yeah.
About process and everything that was going on. And I know, believe me. I am obviously, because of my podcast, it's a necessity and gathering an audience and everything. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's how I'm doing it. But it's interesting though, because given all the creator-owned stuff that you do, I know you do articles and you do, Image will do a PR interview with you. And I know you allow yourself to be interviewed in print. I know you don't do a lot of video and podcast interviews.
No, I don't. Definitely not.
I appreciate you coming on, man. Because
I'm extremely nervous about talking to you, John. I'm not. This is not my forte, believe me.
Come on. Seriously, I don't believe.
I think what it is for me is that, and to sound like an old man again, I really miss things like the Comix Journal and Amazing Heroes and Comix Interview and Comic Scene and things that were more sort of journalistic in nature. And I learned how to express myself and market myself through those specific kinds of media. Mm-hmm. And they don't exist much anymore.
No, you're right.
So I just, I tend to shy away from it because of that, because I'd rather work in fiction than try to, I've been through that whole thing in the early aughts when a lot of us were trying to brand ourselves online and market ourselves in a certain way when the comic book internet thing was kind of new. And so once you've been through it, and I've certainly made my missteps there, quite a few times, said a lot of stupid stuff. It's, it's just not something that interests me on a daily basis because I'm not seeped in it like I used to be,
Yeah. Go on, please.
Well, if I'm not working, I'm, dealing with, family things or just real life things. And I find I'm not as immersed in the culture as I used to be. And also that culture has changed. Like I said, a lot of the things even the things I came up with, like, Wizard Magazine and stuff like that, that's all gone too.
Yep.
Just
absolutely, man. Yeah.
Totally changed. And I'm not against evolution, but it'd be silly to think that I had to spend time trying to keep up with everything,
Sure. Well,
I'd rather just create more material than, be out there trying to pimp myself.
Right. Create rather than talk about it. No, I hear you, man. I always, Art Baltazar and Franco are my buddies, and we do a podcast together. And sometimes Art gets really immersed in the work, and it's like, Artie's making the donuts. Would you rather he talk about making the donuts or making the donuts? It's that simple, man. And no, you're right. And by the way, all of those old magazines that you name checked and everything, huge influences to me. And I'm a lazy writer. It's easier for me to broadcast than it is to write. God's honest truth. So and that's.
I think I'm willing to put the work in. When somebody wants to interview me, usually I'll always say, "Can we do it over email?" Because that's
so interesting.
Gives me a fighting chance on actually sounding coherent.
No, I understand, and I can appreciate. I always feel bad for creators who, and I can appreciate that because you want to form your thoughts and be precise. To me, as someone who does these all the time and did them in sports radio for 15 years, I just feel like, oh man, it's like making a creator write an essay as opposed to just coming on and giving their thoughts and stuff. And it's like, no, that's your job. You're the one that's supposed to write the article, not the interviewee. But I get again, and also knowing how literate you are and going back to things like the basement tapes. I get it. And again, you've got a lot of thoughts. That was you in Fraction, right?
Yeah.
As I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, look, the difference is you're a professional broadcaster. Okay. And that brings with it a certain skill set that you've honed and crafted over the years. And what most creators need to recognize is they don't have that. Those are not the skills that they have cultivated. And I would never, this to me is a very special occasion to do a podcast like this because it's just not my scene. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And this kind of stuff, I feel like I'm not that good at.
Well, yeah, I think you're doing fine so far. And again, I'm glad that we're having this chance to talk because if I had to write this out, it would never get published. It's that. Right. Honestly, man, I've been sitting on a word balloon book for 15 years now. I've done, close to 1,000 of these. And it's like, get off your ass and write the book, for Christ's sake. Yeah. Anyway, enough talking about the donuts. Let's get into the donuts. Talking about making them. So you got America's Best Comics, or America Best Comics?
All America Comics.
Such an ass. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. No, it's a great start. And when does it come out?
June. Be out.
Okay. Oh, so there's plenty of time to order. That's good.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. No, it's terrific. Tell me about your artist.
Well, Dustin Nguyen, I did Wildcats version 3.0 with him. So it's kind of a reunion for Dustin and I. We haven't worked together since then, really.
Insane. That's right. Jesus.
Yeah. That was 15 years ago, by the way.
Indeed. I think we talked about it likely in that interview. That's hilarious, man. Jesus Christ. Well, and he's perfect for that because, again, has that superhero sensibility, but, could put a very interesting spin on it as well. It's beautifully drawn and colored. It just looks great.
Yeah, it turned out really good. It looks way better than I thought it would. And, it's one of those things where I do pride myself on trying to work with really good, interesting artists. And I rarely, reunite with like old collaborators, not for any particular reason, except I'm always looking for the next guy to work with. But this was a special thing, and I was thrilled that he said yes. I just asked him, and he said yes. And I never think about old material that much, but in retrospect, both Dustin and I realized that Wildcats was a very special collaboration. It was a special project for both of us. It's thought of by some fans very fondly, so it was interesting to sort of get the band back together in that respect,
Well, and it was a very political take on Wildcats, as I remember, and you really kind of addressed that idea of a company as an entity, as a person. And hasn't that become more and more relevant? I mean, my God, it hasn't been that long, 2012, when Mitt Romney was trying to explain that companies are people. And it's wrong message, man. And this 99% versus the 1% world that we're currently in, man. But and it's only gotten worse. I mean, good Lord, as we're living through this zombie apocalypse. So it is interesting that you're, again, kind of readdressing that, the individual versus society questions in this new story. Yeah.
That'll never get old, as far as I'm concerned.
Unfortunately.
Right. It'll always be something.
Well, we're always fighting, man. I mean, that's the thing. And it's, again, I'm glad that you are off of social media, because I think it's really easy to be programmed into the dogma of the moment and everything, and just, go follow the sheep, follow the lemmings. I mean,
I have to say, I certainly don't have anything against, Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. I think the only danger that I see is that you end up in your own bubble.
Yeah.
And you're not really getting, varied opinions. You're getting opinions that generally match with your own, because that's who you're connecting with, that's who you're talking to, and that can be, I'm sure that can be comforting, but it can also be very dangerous.
Absolutely.
And I think we've seen the effect that it has on the culture, everybody being in their own sort of isolated opinion space.
Yep.
And, sort of congregating with more like-minded than diverse opinions. And listen, there's enough shit out there to justify that, I understand. However, everybody being in their own bubble, I think, only leads to, not the greatest place sociologically,
Yeah.
And, and again, with All America Comics, what I do know is that I'm not, again, arrogant enough, I hope, to think that anyone under 35 is going to pick up this comic book. But it's not for that readership. They've got their own material that reflects their own interests. This was my take on this sort of generational collision, and to present to my generation, Yeah. So I'm not at all expecting that. I'm not sitting there going, look how relevant I am, you know. I have no illusions, but I didn't do it for that, you know. I did it I had a story to tell, and I still feel like personally I have an audience out there that I can tell it to. And that's what this comic is for. That's who this comic is for.
Understood. And I'm interested in that because really, since you've made that move to creator owned, you know, I mean, you see your own numbers and stuff like that. Are you, you know, happy with your audience? I mean, I've seen you quoted before saying that, you know, and I'm not even going to try and quote it, but essentially it was that, yeah, you're not there for the general public. I mean, you want to make your comics, but you obviously do have an audience that's big enough that justifies doing it. I mean, I you know what I mean? I mean, is there enough for readership given that you're not on social media? You get what I'm asking?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I'm happy to be a cult writer.
Okay.
That's kind of been my line before. As I, you know, I recognize myself as a cult writer, and I'm happy to be that cult writer. Because what happened over the past, you know, 10 years or so is that I plugged into that younger audience through my work in animation.
Yes.
That's my access to that younger crowd. I mean, and I you know, between Ben 10 and the Marvel shows that we worked on, to the new show on Cartoon Network, Power Players, these are shows for a really young audience. And so any itch that I want to scratch in reaching that young audience is very well scratched doing that work. So it really, whereas maybe, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I was very committed to reaching the widest audience that I could with my comic books. Now I'm just content to have the freedom to make them on any level, and put them out, and whoever picks them up, I'm grateful, you know. But I don't feel the pressure. I don't have the burning need to, like, you know, you know, everybody's got to see this. I've got to reach everybody that's in the direct market has to read this thing. That's just not my ambition anymore. You know, I've let that go to a certain extent.
Well, you had your success doing it as well. And so was it the freedom of being able to tell your own story with unfettered, you know, boundaries or anything? Or was it that, you know, that you didn't want to, that you had enough of trying to please the masses, doing X-Men, doing Superman and the like?
Well, it was, I mean, my career path is very strange. I started out in mainstream comics on very commercial properties. Mm-hmm. Once you've done them, you've kind of done them. And what I realized probably in the mid-aughts is that my career path was going to be as follows. Make your name in mainstream comics, make your bones in mainstream comics.
Yep.
So that you can take that name recognition into your creator-owned work and do whatever you want to do. And that's pretty much been how it's gone. And occasionally I've gone back and dipped my toe back in that water, because I have nothing against mainstream comics. I grew up on Marvel. I grew up on DC, just like you did, and a lot of guys of our generation did. So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's just to have the freedom to do whatever you want in the medium that you love. There's nothing that compares to it. You know, there's nothing better than that. I don't care if you write the greatest Superman story ever. It just doesn't compare to having an original idea, building the project, seeing it through to completion, executing it in exactly the way you want to execute it, and putting it out in the world. And it's just, there's nothing like it. And I didn't even know how satisfying that would be, because I honestly didn't know if that was going to be a plateau in my career that I'd ever reach, you know?
Yep. No,
and
yeah.
Once I got there, I thought, this is, you know, I didn't know it could be this good. Now, I'm saying that through a bit of rose-colored glasses. I admit that it has its hardships. It has its challenges, and it's a pain in the ass sometimes, just like everything else is. But on the whole, it's the greatest thing ever to be able to do your own work, originate your own material, and to see it through to completion. It's just, there's nothing like it. I mean, and you can look at the projects I've done just in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Between All America Comics, Jesus Freak, 1975,
Yep.
New Lieutenants of Metal, Sex. I mean, these are not your typical like going for the high sales kind of projects. I mean, I'm scratching a creative itch in a big bad way, and that's first and foremost what I'm trying to do.
No, you're going in a lot of directions, and it is interesting because I think of some of your peers, and most of them reach that same aha moment of, oh, creator owned. Let's make our name at DC and Marvel, take that audience and get to do bigger and better things. And now it's kind of the norm, and isn't it interesting? And I love seeing the newer creators who turn down DC and Marvel. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing my thing, and I got my audience. Everything's all right. Thanks for the opportunity, but I'll pass. So it is interesting. And also, like you said, with animation, not only, I mean, in the cases of Ben 10 and some of these other shows, I mean, they're definitely Y7 shows. I was an adult enjoying the Avengers stuff that you were doing and the Spider-Man stuff you were doing.
Well, we have to do it enough to please ourselves too. I mean, otherwise, why do it? It's funny you mentioned the newer, younger creators coming into the business. It's true they don't have that aspiration to work for the big two like I had. And to go back to All America Comics, that opening scene where she's, fighting and there's a, adult superhero group that's sort of on the scene with her. The fact that she sort of says, nah, I'm good, when they ask her to join up.
Yep.
There's definitely some meta commentary going on right there, which is, it's not an ambition for these new creators. You can't dangle that carrot of, hey, you want to write Spider-Man, or hey, you want to write Batman. Most of them, they didn't even grow up with that as a thing. And which is interesting because it changes the dynamic of our business in such a profound way that I'm sure that, the editors at the big two are scratching their heads going, why don't the same carrots work anymore?
Sure.
That was the power that we had over a lot of freelancers, that we had the best toys.
Yep.
And it's just not the case anymore. And that opening scene in All America Comics was kind of definitely meta commentary on that aspect of what's going on.
No question. Plus the owners of these publications. I mean, we're seeing it play out right now. And I know that it's also, we'll see how much of it is rumor, how much of it is fact. But there is a fact that AT&T, that now owns, all the Warner assets, is trying to cut budgets. And it's a logical leap. And tell me if I'm wrong or if you agree that, hey, we make these TV and movies. We don't need an an IP laboratory like the publishing side. It's a nice idea, but we got enough characters, thank you. I mean, we're happy with what Warner's already generated. We're not interested in new ideas. And again, I'm against that thinking, but I can see corporate, America that now owns these companies saying, not so much with Disney. Disney seems to understand Marvel's value, obviously, and especially making Feige now kind of the Lord God of everything. But yeah, I think with the Warner thing, I think that's a fair corporate attitude. I don't agree with it. What do you think of all that?
Well, I think that the one thing that any big corporation would look at when it comes to making comics and scratch their heads over is that dogged month in, month out production assembly line, make sure you get them out every month mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you look at what the sales are on those monthly comics, which are not great.
Right.
That's the only part where I think an AT&T or a Disney would look at that model and go, I don't know if this model is the most efficient way to put new stories out with these old characters.
Sure.
Otherwise, I think that anyone would see the value in keeping these IPs fresh. And in the most immediate way is in new published material. But the monthly comic output, I think, is the thing that will be looked at and reassessed in the future. Maybe. I mean, look, what the hell do I know? But if I'm looking at it objectively, that's the only component of the comic book business that starts to make less and less sense. Now, cue every retailer in America shuddering even further than the coronavirus is making them shudder. But, you know, you asked, and that is honestly what I think is the only question mark about how are these stories going to be delivered in the future, you know? And I don't even mean moving away from printed material. I just mean that month in, month out production line aspect of comics, you know?
I do. And in fact, I wondered if they might switch to if not even just graphic novels only, more of is it Viz Media or some of the other manga publishers that do the big, you know, kind of phone book size book and say, okay, every quarter we're going to have a new Flash story, Hawkman and Green Lantern all collected, and then a Superman family group collected and stuff like that, and move to that model using the DC characters rather than, like you said, episodic monthly. Because that was the thing when Quesada would talk back in the early aughts about, well, you know, monthly comics are just like TV shows. It's like, no, they're not, because you're back in 7 days. And again, now in the streaming world, that's an option. I mean, I think, and to be honest, I think with streaming, and I'm interested because, again, as a guy that's involved in TV production and stuff, I want to know your thoughts. I think they're going to move back to episodic 7 days just to build momentum, because a lot of times when you just, like, you know, spew a series out there, it's hot for like 2 or 3 weeks and then people don't talk about it anymore.
Well, what I've found with the streaming aspect when it comes to the stuff that we do in animation, I mean, it was not by design, but as it turned out, something like Ben 10 was a big merchandising IP.
Yeah, it was.
You know, that's how it worked out, and that's how it's been.
Yeah, man.
And when you have big merchandising success, everybody wants to try to repeat that success. And of course, you know, we're not the only, you know, there's between us and Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, you know, you name it, the big merchandising IP is a model that a lot of people would like to emulate. Because there's money there. There's a lot of money there. But part of why those IP work in that fashion is exactly what you said. The commercial broadcasting system, I mean, it's right there in how I described it. You have commercials.
Yep.
You can market these ancillary products to the viewer. Streaming, for the most part, has yet to figure that out. I mean, if you're releasing a whole season of shows on Netflix all at once, it's hard to roll out a marketing plan that takes advantage of the life of that show. Whereas if you are putting out an episode every week for 52 weeks or 28 weeks or 36 weeks or whatever, you can roll out your toy line or whatnot, or whatever it is you're marketing to go with that on some kind of schedule that makes sense right now. That's where the collision between how things used to be and how things are going to be. That's the biggest collision I've experienced in, you know, from my perspective, is when we've, you know, started talking about new shows, where is it going to go? Who are we going to pitch to? Those considerations are absolutely talked about and considered. I don't know how they're going to work themselves out. You know, personally, I mean, while I've certainly benefited from the Ben 10 merchandise, and my company has benefited from it, and certainly Cartoon Network has benefited from it, it's not why we got into it. So I'd hate to have to fashion our business around that question, but that question gets asked every time we go out with a new idea. You know, it's a conversation that has to be had and has to be talked about, and I don't know where it's going to land, quite honestly.
Well, you know too that, I mean, and again, the reason why these big corporations have these IPs is for the licensing.
Oh yeah.
And so for from their standpoint, the toys and the birthday cakes and the birthday cards and bed sheets. That's the product.
Oh yeah.
And it's nice having the stories. Sure, I guess I'm shrugging, obviously, but yeah, I mean, again, that's that corporate attitude, and that is interesting, man, because that could be very seductive, I would think, in terms of when you create something like that. Yeah, I've never had a conversation like this with Kevin Eastman or some of the others that have created something like this. So I'm really glad we're getting into this because I do think it's interesting. And there was that great Green Lantern animated series that was made as much to sell those toys of that design as the show. And it was a great show. One season and it's gone. And I know a lot of other podcasts like, what happened? That was a great show. And it's like, it didn't sell toys. That's why they opened up the checkbook and they let them make that story, that show.
Yeah.
So, so this is, I agree. I think it's fascinating. And isn't it interesting? Yeah. That I think I'm glad to hear, obviously, that story is still key for you guys with Men of Action and the things you guys are producing.
I mean, the funny thing about Ben 10 at this point, Ben 10's been around for 10 plus years.
That's amazing and fantastic. Go on.
And we were in a meeting at Cartoon Network, and we were talking about the newest version of the show. I mean, the show that's on the air right now, and which we're EPs and story editors on and whatnot. When we work on the show day in, day out, and they were rolling out a marketing plan that involved all the CP aspects and whatnot, and all the
what's CP? How consumer products. Okay, thank you.
And it was like a 3-year plan, and I said, listen, and this was at the beginning of the show, sort of going into production, this version of the show, and I said, guys, if the show that we make sucks, does that change any of these marketing plans? And they said, not really.
Wow.
And I said, well, okay, so that means that Ben 10 has crossed over into that evergreen IP category. Like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
I mean, Mickey Mouse products do not rise and fall with whatever the latest Mickey Mouse cartoon is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, we've really crossed over into new territory here. I mean, I never thought that anything that, myself and the other guys came up with would have lasted into that strata of, the entertainment business. I mean, it was weird.
That's insane, man. And that's great. It is. I mean, at the same time, seductive and scary, man. That's pretty amazing. So is Power Players, is that different from Ben 10?
Oh yeah. That's a big, I mean, that's like a CG, show that we're doing with it's a foreign co-pro with a company called Zag, who did their last show was called Ladybug.
Okay.
And so this is, this is another boys action show, and it's become sort of a bread and butter industry for us, so it's kind of it's one of the many tracks that we find ourselves riding down in this business now. And it's on, it's on Cartoon Network, and it's about to debut on Netflix. I think sometime in the latter half of March, it'll be on Netflix.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So, it's another feather in our cap, John.
Seriously, man. No, that's amazing. Now, I've never met Duncan, but I know you, I know Steve, I know Joe. I mean, it's great, and I'm thrilled for you guys. And I mean, really, from where Ben 10 started, and where it is now, that's incredible, and I'm glad it's opened those doors. And it's kind of, this is like your God. I'm sorry that the only actor that's coming to mind is Johnny Depp. Let's say Downey Jr. Where you can make you make Ben 10, but it also kind of lets you do your creator own stuff, I would assume, and gives you more of a freedom to do that stuff. Is that fair to assess? Oh,
absolutely. And I would say that many of our creator own projects have had the success of things like The Judge and Doolittle.
I was thinking, was it The Soloist with him and Jamie Foxx, where or Christian Bale, gets to do his cool little gritty movies while he was Batman and stuff like that. I mean, I loved Birdman, the Michael Keaton movie, but the actual plot of the movie, I'm like, that's a 90s or an Adam West problem that doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true. Hey,
So yeah,
At least Christian Bale wins Oscars when he, steps off the
true.
commercial reservation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I know. Poor. That's all right. Downey will walk off Doolittle pretty easily. That's all
Oh
right.
no, he's just fine. But it's funny because we had a meeting at Downey's company. This is some inside baseball.
Oh, cool.
But it was right as the Judge had come out, and not it wasn't a blockbuster. Let's just put it that way.
Indeed, yeah.
That happened to be coincidentally the week that it was announced that he was going to be in Civil War.
Oh, there you go.
There was no inkling of that before that movie, came out. So, it's not difficult to see how these things work. You know what I mean?
Timing is everything. Absolutely.
That's right.
Man. That's hilarious. Jesus. Well, I want to talk about another book, and I was telling you off the air that I really, really loved, and that's Sex. I mean, it's a really cool series. It looks amazing. It is as daring as I remember you guys hyping it up to be, and in the best way. And truly, man, I really loved the first volume. And as I told you, I immediately bought the next 5. I'm like, this is going to be a good read during the zombie apocalypse. I'm going to enjoy this.
Get ready for a ride, man.
Well, let's talk later when we're further along in the story on All America Comics and stuff, and we can revisit more volumes of it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
All right, but and yeah, I mean, it's a great. Now you see again. Now this isn't, and I've only really. I'll be honest. I'm only midway through the first volume, so only like the first 3 issues. But there is again a recognizable hero that you could also imagine being a different character, another, Cypher. I mean, in the best way, but again, can go into directions that there's no way in hell the big 2 would ever allow a character to go into.
Yeah, well, that was always the intent. I mean, Sex is about taking certain superhero tropes, some that are extremely familiar to mainstream audiences, and looking at them in a different way. To say the least. I mean, and as it goes on, I mean, you've got quite a few pages to get through if you stick with it. But it does kind of, it's really about character exploration. It's not heavy on plot. It's very much a character piece. It's very novelistic. Certainly, it's in 6 volumes in. I've heard the complaints people have, nothing happens, Well, I don't know what I didn't promise, it's not a Crisis on Infinite Earths or anything like that. I mean, this is not about plot. It's about behavior. And there's only one way to explore behavior in a comic book. You got to kind of slow down and really take your time with it. So you can observe it properly.
Understood.
And that's what the book is about. It's funny because I think I forget what year that book came out. 2012, 2013. Something started in that year.
Wow.
And it's my most and believe me, I've decried this in the past when I feel like comics are written as like they're TV shows. But this is definitely written like it's a TV show, and I fully cop to it because I'm just digging in on character, and it's its own endless second act, which is what most TV shows that want to have a long life have to try to settle into.
Sure, absolutely, man. Well, it reminds me in the best ways of what Rucka and Michael Lark are doing with Lazarus, and Satellite, even what Fraction and I think Chaykin did with Satellite Sam. I was a big fan of that as well. And I mean, so no, I pointing to those 2 examples. If you haven't checked out Sex, and guess what? Just like the title, there's sex in the book, obviously. Oh, yeah. but
I started out the idea at the beginning was, superhero comics at their best is just pornography with the fight scenes replacing sex scenes. So I just reverse engineered that point of view and just went right for the pornography, I guess. Yeah.
Hilarious. That's fantastic, man. That's like, I always love when Grant Morrison's book came out, his essay about superhero stuff. And, it's there. And I don't know, it must be in the back of my head, and I just don't realize it or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I guess I can see that. That's cool. That's hilarious, man. So I appreciate observations like that. That's great. So then again, no boundaries, no rules, and you do. I'm making sure that I'm saying it right. I was going to say freak Jesus, but Jesus Freak, of course. So tell me about Jesus Freak, man. It's interesting. I was just talking to Mark Miller about American Jesus and his take on the story and stuff. And this is another thing that I'm going to have to pick up and get further into.
Well, Jesus Freak, in a nutshell, is it's a graphic novel I did with the artist Benjamin Marra, who's fantastic.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, basically all it is an origin story for Jesus, told in the style of an old of the old Master of Kung Fu comic series.
Absolutely, man. That's great. Galassi and Doug Munch. Sure.
Yeah, that's all it is, John. I can't profess any deeper meaning or any kind of spiritual bent. It was an exercise in pulp and format. You know, taking. I mean, for myself, I've done it with many other kinds of comics where you take. I mean, I've done it with Jack Kirby many times where I've looked at Kirby's comics as a form in and of itself, and I've taken that form and applied it to other things. So in the case of Jesus Freak, it was taking the Galassi Master of Kung Fu and even the Gene Day stuff, which I'm also a big fan of.
Absolutely.
As its own form, as its own type of comic book, and taking those storytelling values and those stylistic values and overlaying them onto this, first century story about a guy trying to find himself in sort of New Testament Judea, and it, we did a lot of research. It was kind of a fun, different project where I was trying to make it somewhat historically accurate and then also inject a bit of Steranko psychedelia into it, which is cool. One of Galassi's big influences was Steranko.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the common ground for Marra and myself was those old Master of Kung Fu comics. So it's there's definitely the homage is right there on the surface. But I wanted to sort of cross-pollinate that with, again, a subject matter that was maybe unlikely for this type of material, or for this type of approach, I should say. And it certainly, got some attention on that front alone. I mean, I've never had a comic book of mine be vilified on Fox and Friends.
Really excellent.
Oh yeah, I was quite proud of that.
Steve Ducey had a fit over it. Brian Kilmeade, one of those idiots.
Oh yeah, they just went off because we released some promotional material that, I'll just say it right straight up. Jesus does some kung fu, and there's some blood involved, and there's some violence involved, and that's all they needed, to jump on it. And I was quite thrilled, that they felt the need to devote, 2 minutes or 3 minutes of their energy to vilifying our book that hadn't come out at that point, but why let the truth stand in the way of a good story?
Oh no, everyone's quick to judge. Absolutely, man. What are you talking about? You know that. That's great, man. Now, when you write a story like that, you're throwing red meat out there, and there is that group of people that immediately are gonna, hear the dog whistle and start barking.
Yeah, well, sure, but that's my punk rock roots, sort of showing themselves.
I can appreciate that.
And to be quite honest, I wanted to do a historical Jesus story for a long time because I wanted to do something that was very research intensive that I'd really have to sink my teeth into. And at first, that story was going to be really more straightforward. It was going to be inspired more by something like From Hell, which is, very meticulously researched. Mm-hmm. But once I hooked up with Ben Marra and his kind of outlaw comics sensibility, I knew then that's when it crystallized what kind of book this should be. It gave me a more interesting approach to tell the same story I would have told in the more detailed, documented fashion. But this was way more fun to do it this way, as like an old issue of a kung fu comic.
That's great, man. That's excellent. And 1975. That looks really cool, and something I'm going to have to pick up and everything. And this slipped by, and maybe because of the Roman numerals, maybe that confused me or whatever.
Yeah. Again, my own instincts going sort of anti-commercial there, but I have to say, the Roman numeral version makes for a cool logo. You just don't know what the hell you're reading there.
Joe, you have always been about eye-catching covers. I know that. I mean, we talked about this back in the Godland days, and also Wildstorm 3.0, and certainly Kafka, and of course, certainly not to diminish what all the great artists that you had, obviously, to contribute to that crazy look. But it really is. They have always been interesting, eye-catching covers over the years.
Well, I'm not. I'm just not. I just don't have the ego to think that I can get by without it being a good-looking product.
Yeah. That's the door. That's, come in. I mean, that's the neon sign. Please look at this. This looks interesting.
Yeah, I'm just not that good of a writer to think that, if I don't sort of overdo it on the visual side, on the presentation side, I feel like I'll probably be lost in the shuffle. I mean, that's just how I've always felt. And like you say, comics is a visual medium. And even though I was one of those that benefited from, what is now historically we call the writer-driven era of comics, that sort of late 90s, early aughts period. That time is long gone. And these things have to look as good as you can make them, And so it's always a big deal for these things to look great and be eye-catching and pop off the shelves as much as I can control that,
Do you have a few artists in mind for future projects that are atypical and going to do something, drastically different visually?
Yes, but I don't want to say it. They're pretty far out. I have my projects now these days are kind of, I don't like to say few and far between, but they're far between because I tend to take a long time to develop them. Mm-hmm. It takes me longer to write them because I've got other things I'm responsible to do in TV and whatnot. So the next comic book that's going to come out for me is probably going to be something in 2021. It's crazy to me to think that All America Comics is the only thing I'll have out in 2020, but that's just how my schedule has turned out. It's just how it plays right now.
Is it going to be 5 issues in a trade? And I mean, how long of a story do you think All America Comics is going to be?
Oh, All America Comics is one and done.
Okay. Oh, so 5 issues or
no? It's what you saw. That's all there is.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what the hell, Joe?
Well, I mean, I felt like it would only take one issue to, let's just say, make my point.
Wow.
And to be honest, I mean, this is something that's kind of worth talking about. What I normally don't get to do is a single issue of anything.
Been a long time. Sure.
And I feel like it's sort of a lost art.
Yes.
And so coming to this project, like I said, the proof of concept of it meant that I didn't feel like I really had to go any farther than one issue. So I kind of put it all, I left it all out on the field, even though it kind of makes you think there's going to be more from how it ends.
Yeah, you've got a blurb next time or whatever.
Well, I wanted to feel like, just a random issue of something,
Yeah, like that when you used to get those, and again, showing my age, and you'll know the reference, those Whitman bagged 3 comics.
Oh, yeah.
They were always like in the middle of a story arc. So it was a great, Damian Hellstrom comic, Son of Satan. And it's like, yeah, next, whatever. And it's like, yeah, there's no next. I'm going to have to hunt that down. That's not going to be on the spinner rack next week.
Yeah.
So that, dude, you obviously have floored me with that revelation. I had no idea. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of pissed at you because I was really looking forward to you exploring this character and some of the obviously some of the cosmic implications, and that it seemed like that was a call to action. We were going to, go into a little adventure here.
Well, I don't know if I'll there's always a chance I'll come back and pick up the story again, but I didn't want to get locked into that sort of monthly format. It's just not where my head is at right now. And the thing is, it's called All America Comics, which is kind of a nod to the old, Action Comics, Tales of Suspense.
Yeah, the anthologies. Yeah.
Yes. But the story itself was meant to feel like you were being dropped into a ongoing continuity. The story was built that way. It kind of ends that way, and I just wanted to see if I could get that feeling just in 22 pages. It's again, I think it's a lost art.
Yeah.
And again, not to date ourselves, but I'm sure between the two of us, we could come up with a list right now of like seminal single issue stories that are, whether or not they're part of a larger story or part of a larger continuity, and most of them probably are, the single issue that we could bring up just was so impactful for any number of reasons, whether it's, Swamp Thing 21, the anatomy lesson.
Absolutely. This Man, This Monster, a Fantastic Four.
There you go. Animal Man #5, the Coyote Gospel.
Absolutely. Very good. Your own. And Joe, forgive me if it was Kelly, but what's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American One?
Oh, that was Joe Kelly. But yeah, that's definitely.
Sorry. God damn it. Yeah. I apologize. All right.
But Iron Man 128, Demon in a Bottle. I mean,
of course, yes.
These are all pieces of a larger whole, but the piece is supremely satisfying. And I was interested in that. I was interested in that format. I was interested in saying, okay, I'm gonna do something that tries to harken back to that specific flavor of a piece of a larger puzzle, but the piece just works perfectly.
That's amazing, man. That's really cool. And there's a couple of moments when the character finds her perception of reality changing that you use a lot of space. I'll leave it at that because I want people to read it to experience that. And I always find that incredibly disturbing in a comic. Yeah. When some of your choices of the vast emptiness of space, let's put it that way, is shown. And I remember a couple old 70s comics that blew my mind that way when pages went that way. And I'm sure maybe you were thinking of that as well.
Well, that, and also it was, it's such a, I've explored those similar types of things in books like Godland, and
sure, yes.
In that respect, in the case of Godland, I did go in with the sort of the Stan Lee purple prose and sometimes would describe what you're seeing in very florid language. This one, when I saw what Dustin had did, because we did this comic Marvel style. I wrote it as a plot, and he, did the art, and then I went in and did the dialogue.
Okay.
And once I saw what he had done, even though I sort of directed him to do it that way, I didn't know how I was going to write it until I saw it. And I thought, I'm not going to ruin this with whatever cockamamie language I could come up with. Because some things, there are no words. That was kind of my philosophy of that sequence.
God, this is like such a weird, I don't even know how the market is going to react to this, because it is just like, here it is. See you later.
I got to be honest, John. I don't know how they're going to react to it either.
Interesting, man. Well, I hope that listeners of this will be intrigued enough to want to pick it up, man. I mean, honestly, I that has taken what you've done to a different level that I really wasn't expecting. So that's incredible. And now I even think more so. You got to check out All America Comics, man, in June. That's going to be great. I know we're close to an hour, and if you don't mind, I am interested in the Officer Down experience. First of all, my buddy Burnham, who I love.
Oh yeah,
and I miss him greatly. He was in Chicago for so many years, and now I think he's on the West Coast now. Now he went to Pittsburgh for a while.
No, he spent some time out here in LA, and I think he's back somewhere like maybe Kansas City, I think.
Oh, there you go.
Just recently moved back, I think.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. So, the comic itself was insane, but then they make this great low budget movie out of it. So, what was that experience like? How involved were you? It was a smaller movie, which I think is an interesting kink as opposed to, the big budget thing and everything. But just tell me about that whole experience.
Well, I mean, it was definitely an independent film. I mean, it was made in exactly the way that any random Image comic is made. I mean, the guys who produced the Crank films found the comic, came to me and said, "Hey, we want to make this into a movie." I said, "Okay, great. I'll write the script and I'll produce it with you." I said, they didn't really have a plan. They wanted to do it.
Cool.
So I said, "All right, I'm a producer on it. I'm going to write the script." And they said, "Fine." So I wrote the script, and then we snagged a director who was Sean Crahan, who's Clown from the band Slipknot.
Crazy.
Yeah. He directed a lot of their videos, so he had some experience behind the camera. We found some private equity. And movie cost, I think, around $4 million.
That's great.
And, went off and made the movie. Now, the interesting part about it was I wrote the script thinking there's no way this movie's going to get made. There's just no way. So I just wrote it like I would just write anything. I didn't think about budget. I didn't think about anything except getting the script done. So, and the script I reprinted that version of the script in the back of the Officer Down trade, soft cover that came out right around the time the movie came out. So people can check that out and actually read the original version of that script. Because when we finally got the money and started, pre-production, I started to get the daily visits. Joe, can you cut this part out? Can you cut that down? Can you maybe trim that action scene a little bit? Because so as a producer, I understood. As a writer, I was like, "Oh my God, what are we doing here?" But it was, amazing to see what Burnham and I had created on paper, almost as a goof. Certainly just something to amuse ourselves. Now there are sets being built, and actors being cast. I mean, we've got Kim Coates to play Officer Down, from Sons of Anarchy. And I tell you, the level of commitment that everybody on that crew had to just making that movie was amazing, because when you're in it, when you're in the belly of the beast and you're just day after day eking out, I think we had about I think maybe I feel like I want to say maybe a 30-day shooting schedule. It was tight.
Yeah.
People are there to work, and you don't sit back and think, "What are we doing here? What is this movie?" You just got to get it done.
Yeah, no time. So, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was fantastic to see everybody from, the grips to the makeup department to the the DP, the first AD, everybody. Just roll up their sleeves and do this thing and make this weird piece of pop culture. And because Clown was on tour with Slipknot, he shot the movie in between tour legs. So once he finished shooting, he had to head off and get back on the road.
Tour. Yeah.
So the post-production really came down to myself, Mark Neveldine, who was one of the producers, one of the directors on the Crank films. We just had to, roll up our sleeves and just, get the film done. And then when Clown would be able to roll back through town, he would come in and make notes on the edits and stuff like that, and see where we were at and make sure that it was still in line with what he wanted to do.
Sure.
But I got to tell you, it was, from start to finish, from my perspective, a very handmade film. And I mean that in the best sense. I mean, it was very much like, let's put on a show, guys. Let's build the tent and put on a show. And the fact that it came out as well as it did, I mean, look, this is not a movie was designed to win Oscars. This is a grindhouse B movie of the lowest order. But to have made it in part just with our own hands, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And now it's, the damn thing's on Netflix. Anybody can watch it.
Yep.
And I've heard reactions to the film that vary from this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever seen to this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. The balls on this movie are swinging, man.
Hilarious. So
what we set out to do, we absolutely did. No one was under any illusions that it was going to be anything more than what it is. So it was great. And we got to shoot in LA. So it wasn't like we had to go to, Vancouver or Budapest or any weird place.
Yeah.
To get it done. We're in LA. I got to go home every night,
Sure.
After we would shoot. And I mean, it was fantastic. One of the best experiences of my life, I think, in my career, certainly.
Would you want to do another movie like that and get that involved? I mean, obviously you're busy with animation and stuff, but any other live action ambitions?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would want to. I think the next time out, I would want to hopefully level up. I mean, making a movie on that scale for $4 million. I mean, every bit of money was accounted for. There was no fat on that movie whatsoever. And there were times where we, could have used an extra dollar or two. So to do it again, I would hope that, you have a little bit more money. So it's not quite the white knuckler that sometimes Officer Down was. Yeah, I mean, the idea with all of this, with my whole career, I like to make stuff in whatever medium presents itself. If it's creatively satisfying and it's going to get me off in some fashion, I'm up for it,
Yeah.
Whether it's a live action TV, another animated show, or live action, features, whatever it is, more comics, it's all, I feel like it's all out there. And whatever I have the creative opportunity to do, I'm interested in doing.
See, that's great, man. And honestly, and this, I hope it doesn't sound condescending or in any way other than earnest. I hear the excitement in your voice, and that's great to see. And as we are peers, I feel the same way about the stuff that I do. And it's great to see because a lot of people could see our time as, all right, 10 years to retirement. That's great, whatever. And it's like bullshit, man. No. Yeah. And again, I know you've got that punk rock attitude and it's obviously morphed into who you are today. But I mean, no, the spirit and the energy is still there to continue to create.
I mean, I don't know how to do anything else, John.
Yeah.
I have no other skills. And believe me, I still have the anxiety of Jesus Christ, am I going to have to get a day job at some point here? And I have to, go work at, Target or something. I don't know. Because that's really the only other thing I'm qualified to do is to, be, some sort of retail robot. So that's definitely a motivation to keep going is that, and I've always been a big believer in work begets other work. And opportunity and commitment to whatever that's in front of you will lead to other work. And that's all that it's about. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, all that we take with us is our experiences that we have,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm just looking for the next experience. Whatever medium it's in, whatever it turns out to be, I'm up for it.
Awesome, man. I'm telling you, I'll let you go. That's a good place to end and say All America Comics coming up in June. More volumes of Sex or?
Oh yeah, Sex has gone to again to get out of the monthly grind, which I found I had to do. With volume 6, Sex went to a trade only format.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. Cool.
Now, it's interesting because as you'll read it, it won't seem like anything because volume 6 has, just as many chapters as any collection would have.
Mm-hmm.
And volume 7 will follow in that same spirit, but we'll just be banking material, banking chapters, and then we'll just put a chunk out at once. So the next, if all goes according to plan, the next volume of Sex will hopefully be, first half of 2021.
Excellent, man. Well, there you go, man. There's the gamut right there from a one-shot like All America Comics to a graphic novel only in Sex Volume 7 coming out in 2021. That's great. Joe, seriously, man, this is a great conversation, and I really appreciate you breaking your own rules and choosing to talk to me.
Well,
and,
it's a rule of self-preservation, John. I don't know if I'll ever listen back to this with anything but embarrassment and shame.
Oh man, well, please consider coming back at the very least. But thanks a lot for talking tonight.
You bet, John.
That's Joe Casey, America Best Comics with an X, coming soon to Image. Reach back and grab 1975 and Sex and some of the other great recent books. Hell, even go back to Officer Down. Compare the graphic novel to the movie, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how both match up as well as they do. Great conversation with Joe Casey. Can't thank him enough, and looking forward to future talks right here on Word Balloon. Thanks again for listening. More great programming coming in the days ahead. Man, it's been a very full March already, and we've had a lot of all-stars come on. Elsa Chartier, Tom King, Dan Slott, Jerry Ordway. Really, really happy with a lot of the conversations we've had. And the ever-changing comics market. God, I recorded a conversation with my buddy Pat Brower from Challengers Comics, and then the comics market changed in the next couple days with the various lockdowns in cities and in states and countries. And here we are in Illinois facing a more severe lockdown beyond curbside service. So I expect to be talking to Patrick in the days and weeks ahead and ask him how he's doing in his comic shops, Challengers and the like, and his good partner Dal. I wish everybody a lot of luck, and we'll get through this as best as we can. And Word Balloon will be here to entertain you and keep your mind off of the drudgery of having to stay in. But I'll do my best to entertain you with some great comic book conversation and pop culture conversation in the days and weeks ahead. Thanks again for listening today. Thank you, Aftershock, for your patronage. Again, you'll find some great graphic novels and individual issues waiting for you to occupy your time if you go to their website, aftershockcomics.com. And thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your patronage at patreon.com/wordballoon. In the days ahead, I've got a lot of things scheduled. I hope they come through. I don't want to tease any names until they are final, but I did manage to do a trivia contest on TV and sci-fi movie trivia with Tom King, Julie Benson, and Shauna Benson. It was long promised, and we finally recorded it last Friday. I'll be presenting that to you in a couple days. Wanted to put out a couple new conversations in between the King conversations. It really is just the game. And I think you'll have fun playing along. My hope is that you will submit questions for future games as well. And like I said, I'm just starting to get the hang of live streaming. We did an podcast that we live streamed on Facebook on Sunday. It's there on all of our pages, including my page, and also Word Balloon Live. But I will be conducting some Word Balloon video interviews as well in the days leading up. And hopefully arranging a couple more trivia games that we can do live and get you, the audience, involved and maybe play along. So thanks for listening. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2020.